I think people may be wondering, like, why do we have a protocol designer and a fashion designer on stage together?
I'll say something to him and he'll be like, dude, what the fuck is a protocol? No one knows what that word means.
You guys use so much jargon and so many abbreviations.
Something that we always think about at Uniswap is how do we make what we do understandable to people? The mission of DeFi to me is about like making finance more accessible.
I was the outsider going into Paris Fashion Week. I thought there's no way they're gonna let me in. I'm gonna be like a bull in a china shop. I'm gonna be a sore thumb.
People in crypto, maybe people in the world love an underdog narrative. The bigger you get, like you're just not going to please everyone. We didn't get here by just doing the thing that made everyone happy the entire way. For crypto, part of what we're pioneering is like a meaningful distribution of value.
That was beautifully said, though.
Did any jargon in there?
Don't really know what it meant, but I'm invested.
Welcome to Web3 with A6 and Z. I'm Sonal, and we have Hayden Adams, founder and CEO of Uniswap Labs and inventor of the Uniswap protocol, and Colm Dillane, the multimedia artist behind fashion darling and CFDA award winner KidSuper. This conversation was based on our Founder Summit event in October, but is more relevant than ever as the crypto industry focuses on mainstream applications and users. As a reminder, none of the following should be taken as business, investment, legal, or tax advice. Please see a6nz.com/disclosures for more important information. Thanks for being here, guys. So excited to do this session. I think people may be wondering, like, wait a minute, why do we have a protocol designer and a fashion designer on stage together? So just off the bat, you guys did a collab together in celebrating pink. I don't actually want to know, like, how you guys met or any of that. I actually want to know what you guys learned from each other, like, you know, coming from different vantage points in doing that. Like, what kind of brought you guys together, drew you together? Like, why do you love jamming with each other so much?
For me, one thing, and by the way, thanks for having me here. Great to be here. Super fun. One thing for me that's been really interesting hanging out with Colm and the KidSuper team is they kind of like keep me in check on the things that I say that sound insane to people that don't work in crypto. Where it's like, I think that, we spend so much of our time at these conferences and talking to each other. And then I'll say something to him and he'll be like, dude, what the fuck is a protocol? Like, what do you mean, a protocol? No one knows what that word means. Or just backstage 2 minutes ago, he was like, wait, what is an L2? And I don't, and it's really good because I think that they're like such a creative team, and they're like, and Colm is like so creative and has this like really interesting way of thinking about things, but it also helps like me realize when I'm, it's like, in order to, something that we always think about at Uniswap is how do we make what we do understandable to people?
Yes.
How do we make, what we do, like we have to like connect crypto. It's been this like parallel economy, this like siloed thing. How do we make that a thing that like more people use? Yeah. And I think that like, hanging out with, going beyond our like local industry is really important to that. And so I like, something that I think that we have in common is that they also like to like really push out beyond their industry and do things that are like, less, go kind of like beyond the fashion world, like dig into the tech world and other kind of interesting things.
Yeah.
One other like super last quick thing. I think that like we both kind of do this thing where we think like, like a lot of the best ideas don't come from like this like planned out strategy. I think something that we both do and they do a lot is like, wouldn't it be funny if we did,
X.
If we did X where like, for us, it's like, if we sold socks, for them it's like, if we put a soccer field on a rooftop in Brooklyn.
Totally.
Yeah. I think also just on a sheer, like, we're similar ages, you're an entrepreneur, there was like this energy that I loved when we were collaborating. And as he mentioned, I don't necessarily understand the most about crypto, and you guys use so much jargon and so many abbreviations. Like, everyone would know the abbreviations. But I think it was cool because one of the people that work at KidSuper is very into crypto. And I was like, if I could have a sit-down conversation with Hayden on camera, maybe it could bridge the gap a little bit. But unfortunately, Hayden rambled for about 25 minutes and no one understood what he was saying. But we're still working on that. But yeah, I think it's a huge thing is like we're both trying things in different fields. We both started from kind of a college room dorm, and I think to see where we've gone is pretty exciting. And also we hang out kind of normally outside of this stuff, and that's been cool as well.
That's amazing. Well, you're holding back, Colm, because you were telling me, hey, I've been hanging out at this conference, picking up on what Hayden was saying, and there are acronyms for things that don't need to be acronyms.
Yeah.
Like, tell us more about that.
It sounds like really high-tech stuff, and then you act like, what's that mean? And it's quite simple. And you're like, why did you put so many abbreviations? But yeah, I can also, after watching the politicians on stage, I've been answering quite politically. Just tandem on a story about my life.
He threatened to do that to me, and I was like, don't do that. So a theme I'm hearing from you guys is that you guys are constantly evolving. You're scared of stagnating. You know, too many people are afraid of evolving and trying new things. Like, this is a big, important protocol. You're building a very strong brand. What do you tell people when they say, well, you don't need that? Like, how do you measure that? Like, is that really necessary? Like, do you have a justification to, like, the business people or even to yourself?
Yeah, so I think that like the entire Uniswap brand initially was actually inspired by a single photo of Vitalik, where he's wearing this. A few people in this audience will probably recognize. He's like wearing this like full pink and purple jumpsuit with like a blue cat bag, in this like gorgeous backdrop of like the Greek island or whatever he's on. And I think that like part of like the mission of DeFi to me is about like making finance more accessible. And I think that like the culture of finance is part of what makes it kind of exclusive and inaccessible.
Yeah.
And so like a lot of like, I think for DeFi to make finance accessible, we can't just make the like technology more broadly available. You have to make it like culturally and socially more understood, and people have to feel like it's something that they can't just like, they can't just technically participate. They have to feel like they can, and they have to feel welcomed in. And so I think that like the kind of like the fun and the pink is part of that. I think that like, to some of what Colm's saying, like, just like the way that you talk about and the way that you frame things, right? That's where like the Unisocks project came from. Like when the first thing that I did after raising venture capital and forming a company was not build like the second version of the protocol. That came after. We spent the first 3 months of our runway making like tokenizing socks. And the idea of tokenizing socks is that, when people ask to me what do you do with Uniswap, I kept having to be like, well, there's this like token called MKR and you can't buy it on Coinbase, but you can buy it. And it kind of made sense, but like I kind of wanted to be able to go like, oh, actually you can just buy socks on it. And so we like spent 3 months making that happen. And then, for a while, the way I would describe Uniswap to people is like, oh, it's like a site where you can go to buy socks. So it's just like, there's sort of just like, how do you connect, how do you make it feel more tangible? And that's even the cloud. I don't think we need to go into the details of it right now, but the cloud we're doing right now is like a coffee shop where you can go and you can buy coffee with crypto in Brooklyn. And neither of us drink coffee, but it's like pushing the boundaries of how people access and think about our products in a way that just like is like understandable.
Thinking it mainstream. That's so interesting.
I think it's a super smart way to look at it. And I remember yesterday the question, they were like, they asked the politicians, like, what's the blank page to describe?
Yes.
And he's thinking of good ways to tangibly describe crypto.
Yes, like you don't have to just tell a story, but you can actually build something, have something concrete. So I want to get a little specific and ask some very concrete questions. So one is on the theme of brand and marketing, on the power of naming. So you named Unisocks and you have Uniswap. And I don't know if people know the backstory. You told me once that the backstory for the unicorn was, I think, based on an art tapestry. You should tell more about this. Like, do people know this story about the origins?
By the way, the original name of Unisocks was going to be the New York Stock Exchange, and the lawyers wouldn't let me, so we called it Unisocks. The early imagery and branding of Uniswap was based on these tapestries that sit in the cloisters.
In Upper West Side of New York.
Yeah, exactly. And it was actually like a castle that I think Rockefeller transported from Europe to New York and then moved these unicorn tapestries. They're in the public domain, and so they're technically owned by the Met, but they're in the public domain, so we just kind of took them, and they have an art style called mille fleur, which means thousands of flowers, and it's like these unicorn tapestries with all these floral imagery. And so we still use that today. Yeah, actually, the first time I met you, you were wearing the mille fleur with like the floral tie with the unicorn, which is actually almost verbatim the unicorn tapestry, which I love. I think that was 5 years ago, and I have only worn a tie twice since then. But only the unicorn tapestry tie. Well,
Colm, in your case, so your show names, I don't know if people know this, are super thematic. So here's some examples. I'm going to read them out loud. Bull in China Shop, everything's fake until it's real. It's still up in the air. Then you also had running as fast as you can. Like, that's just some of the show names. Tell us about how you think about naming and why do you do these things, like name them that way.
All of those are, they became, well, when you're doing a fashion show, you have these very specific themes. But for a lot of those, I was the outsider going into Paris Fashion Week. I was a kid from Brooklyn who was screen printing in high school. And so I thought, there's no way they're going to let me in, but I'm going to be like a bull in a china shop. I'm going to break something. I'm going to be a sore thumb. And a lot of those fashion shows ended up getting kind of great reviews based on those concepts. Like the bull in the china shop, they called it the breakout show of Paris Fashion Week.
Yep.
Running as fast as you can was a hilarious one because a lot of the models ended up slipping. And I, at the end, was like, sometimes you slip and fall, but you got to remember to get up and run as fast as you can. And they thought the slipping was intentional. And so the names have helped a lot push the brand forward.
So on the slipping, I have to probe. So there is this theme, it's actually pretty common in crypto too, where spectacle is sometimes what kind of gets people's attention. It comes up in meme coins, comes up in other memes, other ways. It's great to grab attention. That is part of branding and marketing. But you also sponsor culture, essentially, like with what you're doing with your factory space. Can you talk more about that and why you do that? And I guess I want to kind of get to this understanding. Well, we'll get here in a minute, but I want to hear your thoughts on sponsoring culture.
So
first.
I always had these physical locations since I turned my dorm room into a store. I always had all these people from college come to my dorm and buy from my dorm room, and then I got kicked out of my dorm. But I had this idea of, okay, if I can convert a dorm into a store, I can convert a store into a dorm. And so I had this store that I lived in the back of in Brooklyn, and then I would let anyone sleep there. And so I had a little recording studio in the basement and all this stuff, and it became this hub for creativity.
Yeah.
And it wasn't so much like, oh, this is gonna end up being this success, but it ultimately led to a lot of the artists from the basement became superstars, and they ended up wearing KidSuper, and then it helped the brand. But for me, it was the same reason I'm here. I like meeting interesting people. I like working on cool projects, and having a physical location kind of exponentially made that happen.
That's great. So,
I can attest to, like, I've been to their studio, and every time I go there, I meet someone like really interesting, or it's like some weird, cool thing happening, or
Yeah. But I have to ask, like, do you still let strangers like off and come in and hang out?
I tried to not,
Yes.
but depending on how much crypto they have, I'll let them in.
So, the reason I asked that question is whether you still let strangers do this and whether the model is the same is because there's this other theme that happens that I think will resonate for a lot of people in this room where you have a core community. This is very true of Uniswap, like the OG degens and whatnot. Not that they're a homogenous group, but, degens. And then you try to evolve your product and go beyond. And some might argue you're, quote, selling out. Like, how do you guys wrestle with that one?
Yeah, I think that for me, people in crypto, maybe people in the world more broadly, like love an underdog narrative. And I remember in the earliest days, right, it was just like Uniswap versus Bancor was actually like the, they had raised $150 million in a 2-minute ICO, and then we had raised, a $50,000 grant from the Ethereum Foundation, or 60K. And so people were like rooting for us. We were this underdog. And then the bigger that we got, we just had to compare ourselves against different, if like early on it was like almost like a wartime, like we were like always fighting with the other, decentralized exchange projects, and people were rooting for us, and there was like everyone was like kind of championing it. And then there was this like inflection point during DeFi summer where Uniswap went from 10 million a day to $1 billion a day in trading volume, and there was all these tokens launching, and then Sushi Swap came out, and the entire narrative from Sushi was actually like they're actually backed by these evil venture capitalist giants, no offense, and
None taken.
and they like kind of flipped the narrative, and suddenly they were the underdog, and they were like, Uniswap is funded by venture capital, we are the community-oriented project, and they were kind of their narrative, and suddenly like. But when I like kind of like fought back a bit, or when I would argue with them in the early days, and I eventually learned not to, but when I would argue back with them, people would get mad at me, and people would be like, "No, they're the underdogs. Like you don't." And that, but then if I was, but at the time, I could compare myself against centralized exchanges.
Yes, and there you are still the underdog.
Yeah, But actually today, honestly, even like that level of like comparison, people still, because Uniswap has gotten big enough, but like, we're the underdog again when we're fighting the US government.
Yeah.
Right. And so people, some of our best comms day, like our best comms day probably this year was when we had the SEC Wells notice. Because people really do like love to root for an underdog.
Well, that's actually the first time I've heard a very positive spin on a Wells notice. So congratulations on that. And for sticking it out and rooting it and just sticking in there. Colm, in your case, is it selling out to take money?
I think it's definitely a little bit of selling out, but even like me doing a crypto thing would be considered selling out,
Really?
I would say. I mean, no offense, again, you guys are getting a lot of shots,
Yeah.
But I think it's for me, the transparency of the brand has that's been what's been able, like I did a Starbucks collab, and that's like as selling out as you can get, and especially since I don't drink coffee. And I had to be like, ice spice latte, my favorite. But that led to me, like, and they give you a lot of money when you do that, but that allowed me to do a lot of creative things.
Yes.
And I've never gotten an investment from these evil investors that he's talking about, but that allows me to not care so much about certain financial decisions that I make and be truly invested in like the creative pursuit.
Yes.
And so, sometimes you gotta pose for Starbucks, but then you're allowed to, do these fashion shows that I described. Like, there's only one other American brand on Paris Fashion Week, and I think I'm the only brand on Paris Fashion Week that has no investors.
That's amazing.
So,
I mean, the model that comes to mind for me is Phoebe Philo, who went direct and she took a little money from LVMH's family office, but she's kind of doing her own thing. But in that case, it doesn't feel like selling out. So it felt like a positive thing in that case.
Yeah, I mean, also that Phoebe Philo's worked in such an institution for so long that she probably doesn't know how to bootstrap it either.
Yeah,
that's another
true.
thing that's funny when you speak to these designers they're like, oh, you need 50 assistants and all this stuff, and so.
And you don't have that big a shop.
No.
Yeah.
But I think the selling out's a funny thing. I think you just have to be transparent about it. Like, yes, I got 300K, but I spent it on this fashion show.
Yeah, or you got to do it Hayden does, just fight back.
Yeah, and I will say, you can't please everyone. Like, the bigger you get, you're just not going to please everyone. And so I think for me, people accuse us of selling out when we do anything that involves change, and for me, it's way scarier to stagnate than it is to to try to evolve.
Yep.
And so people don't people complained that we were announced that we're doing a chain last week, but for us it would be way more selling out to just lock in and only do what we've done for the past we didn't get here by just doing the thing that made everyone happy the entire way. So
since you mentioned the chain, Unichain, I have to just ask this. It's going to take a quick twist and a turn for a second. What is your vision? It's actually surprised some people in this room that you went with a more general purpose versus app specific. Can you talk a little bit about that? What was your decision and rationale and how you made that?
I think the funny thing with general purpose and app specific is that the fact that it's a programmable EVM doesn't mean it can't be when you compare, I think blockchains are easiest to compare against servers.
Okay.
Right? And you might have a server that's mostly focused around running an app, a single app or a specific set of apps, but generally you still have these they're broadly programmable. And right, and what is even a Uniswap focused chain even mean from you still need to have for example, Uniswap v4, we're introducing all these customizable ways you can create a market. And to support all of that, you actually need it to be a general purpose programmable thing. So I think that the vision generally is we need to scale blockchains. We need to have chains that are focused around specific use cases, and then we need to figure out how to connect them to each other such that it feels in the early days of Ethereum, right, we had this amazing user experience where it was less than 1 cent for every transaction, and you could move in between applications very seamlessly. And the reason for that was because we were running every single thing on Ethereum on a single box. And you can't do that. That doesn't scale. And so good news is now we have more use cases and more applications and more transactions than you can run on a single box. And so you need to scale. And so what we're trying to do, and one of the reasons that I'm so excited for us to be stepping into this arena or this space, it kind of we're going to be forced to grapple with the hard problems that hold us back. And so it's how can you make it feel like it felt in the old days, but with this new structure? And I think that we're very focused on kind of being like a full stack team. I think a lot of people in crypto like to choose this like very narrow sliver of a tech stack and say like, we're going to focus all our efforts here. We're like this specific infrastructure layer.
Yes.
But sometimes I think where you have the friction points aren't within the layers, but they're between the layers. And I think that not enough teams in crypto span the disciplines. And so something that I think makes us pretty unique in this space is that we go all the way from a very design-oriented consumer product all the way to low-level blockchain development and kind of every layer in between, the APIs and the kind of all the different standards for kind of connecting these pieces. And I think that that will allow us to find the patterns that other people can adopt, and then we can have a more scalable.
That is so interesting. So I have a probe for both of you guys on this.
That was beautifully said, though.
Did any jargon in there?
Don't really know what it meant, but I'm invested.
So on this note of full stack design, and this is a question for you too, Colm, because you have the Warhol factory-like space. You don't have a collective. KidSuper is you, but at the same time, can a collective, and in the case of tech, so in fashion,
painters.
Can a collective design in fashion? And in the case of tech, open source is essentially a collective. How can you really go full stack and really kind of control the design interface, the stack? What do you really think? Is that really, can a collective design?
It's a tough one. I think you do need one kind of vision to follow so no one fights.
Yep.
Because I've done a lot of stuff where it was we're all going to get it, and then nothing gets done because there's no captain. So you need a captain of a ship. I think in the creative field, it's almost, even if the idea is not the best, just committing to an idea is more important than talking so much about ideas.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered the question.
It does answer the question. You're saying there needs to be a captain at the helm, and a collective can't design by itself.
Yeah, you do. Because I've done a lot of different worlds where I was creative director of different projects, and just having someone where the yes or no and the focus to commit to something is super important.
Yeah. What do you think?
I think it's interesting. I think in some ways they can, but I think that I think that people in crypto to do the crypto side of it are a little bit too quick to try to there's these values of decentralization.
Yes.
And they're important, they're real, and they're especially important at the technology layer. But I think that they are a little bit less important at the vision product kind of thinking layer. And I think that people in crypto are so quick to want to, even the Ethereum Foundation has this addition by subtraction philosophy, which is real and there's value to it, but sometimes it's a little too subtracted. I think that the more Vitalik for example, shares his opinion about where Ethereum should go, I think the less people fight and argue. And
yes.
It came up with these not to use some jargon, but a counter abstraction proposal. Then everyone was fighting about what to do, and then Vitalik kind of came in and was just okay, he came up with a new proposal. He had been in favor of one proposal, and then other people were complaining about it. And then there was a whole tension in the industry for months or years on this, what to do. And then Vitalik just wrote this new proposal in an afternoon, put it out there, and everyone's pretty much on board with it.
Yes, great. That's super interesting. So I'm going to ask a specific question. That's another point of commonality between the two of you, which is the power of drops. So in crypto, you guys pioneered the airdrop, and it's now become synonymous with crypto token launches, and then the industry's seen a lot of extreme professionalization, airdrop farming, making it challenging for new products to get tokens into the hands of real people. Do you have thoughts on what people should do when it comes to airdrops? And then Colm, I have a question for you about drops in fashion.
Yeah. And by the way, I think that even our kind of drop philosophy extends beyond airdrops. When we launch a product, we do try to go the extra mile to make it feel special. Airdrops in particular are really interesting. I actually love them. I think that, but they're often done very poorly. When we did the Uniswap airdrop, right, what we did is we took, it was 2.5 years into the development of Uniswap. It had been public, and there were, at that point, over a few 100,000 people had interacted with the protocol. And we, in my head, what's the protocol? No,
there's no other word for a protocol.
Yeah, there's no other word. It's a protocol. But we had this moment where we sent every single person who'd ever interacted with the protocol with 400 tokens, right? And I think for me, a lot of crypto, right, it's about a fair distribution of ownership and value. And I think that the traditional world of venture capital and tech, while I think that there's an investment of money and then people build something valuable, but the distribution of ownership and value is not proportional to the value created. Investors deserve a huge amount of credit for taking risk and for putting in money, But like, when YouTube is worth tens of billions of dollars or hundreds of billions of dollars, like that value is like a huge amount of it is created by the community and the early adopters and the YouTubers, and they don't get a cut.
That's right.
And so to me, like, one of the things that makes crypto different, and there's all these like legal challenges that other people talked about. We don't need to get into it now, but like ignoring the legal challenges, like I actually think it's like a better model to just have a more direct relationship with your users and more directly distribute value proportional to where it's created. And so when SushiSwap happened, the narrative from SushiSwap was like, we're the more community-oriented project. We kind of, and so, this is a better distribution of value. But who was the distribution of value to? It was actually SBF yield farming with customer funds and, a new people that were pouring in money, but not. And for me, it was like, well, actually, there's been like hundreds of thousands of people that have made this thing successful. And so like the airdrop was a way to kind of give back to everyone that had helped make it successful along the way and actually have a better distribution of ownership. We were talking actually with the Axie people who are here today. And, I think that there was like a community of, there was like many thousands of users in the Philippines. And at the time of the airdrop, it was like 1,200 USD, I think, and it peaked out at a much higher number. And every single one of them got that value, and for a lot of people it was like life-changing money. And so all these stories came out about people that had like been involved in Uniswap in the early days, done various things, and then they like received almost like a meaningful, not a lot of the time you have like these like almost meaningless, like when a company goes public they'll like do something, you get a 50% discount on $200, or like you have these like very small things. And I think that like for crypto, part of what we're pioneering is like a meaningful distribution of value.
That's amazing. That's the best explanation and rationale I've heard for airdrops ever. That's so great.
And then that's not always what you see in practice.
Yeah. In execution, it doesn't. What would you give if you had one piece of quick advice for people on how to do airdrops right, like lightning round? What would you say?
Just think about what you're doing. When we did the Uniswap airdrop, we actually were worried that no one would ever be able to do anything like it again, because no one could game the Uniswap airdrop because no one was expecting it. Because when we did it, it was like the first. It wasn't truly the first of its kind, but it was. There was like Omisego did a small airdrop way back in the day, but it ended up being a meaningless number. So we thought like, well, no one can replicate this. And then everyone replicated the exact same structure. But what we said was also true, which is like, and it was because everyone was gaming it, right? And so like, you just have to think about, yes, we had the advantage of being able to do it with no one expected, but like, okay, now people are expecting it, think about things that you can't be gamed, think about things that are meaningful. Versus today, I think people kind of are a little bit lazy and they're like, okay, it's going to be gamed, but it gets a token out there and I get mine. And so it's like, I think you just have to really like be thoughtful. It's really challenging though.
I agree. So Colm, fashion drops. Thoughts on the Supreme model? Netflix did drops of seasons of TV shows. Like, do you think this works? I asked this, by the way, because it's actually relevant to a lot of people in the room from a branding and marketing perspective, too.
It's crazy that the streetwear drop became like this world, like everyone was copying it. The reason it happened was just because of like the cultural moments in Soho where everyone would line up.
Oh, I remember the lines. Yeah.
So they decided like, oh, we'll just do drops on Friday instead, and it'll be less chaos. And that just became this thing. But now, I mean, it's overdone, and the hype around drops has died down, and you see it across all brands. So now there has to be something new. What is the next drop model? Because everyone started doing it.
Do you have thoughts on that by any chance?
I think the next thing you have to do is just more, right? Like instead of it's just a drop of clothes on Friday, you're having a class, you're having a performance, you're having a thing. Like as you were saying with the big building that I have, like just getting people want more and expect more, I think now. Just dropping a t-shirt on a Friday isn't gonna get the love that it once did.
I went to their New York Fashion Week show, and as an example, and they did it was like instead of like a runway, they just had like stand-up comics come up and like do a comedy bit wearing their clothing, and to me that's like way more interesting than just watching someone
like
walk down
a show. Totally. So in the last 5 minutes, I just want to ask you guys some kind of rapid fire lightning round style questions. So another thing in common in the industry, both fashion and tech and open source particular, in open source it's a feature, not a bug, is copying. Thoughts? Good, bad, ugly?
Fashion's actually hilarious, where you can almost copy exactly, and you can't So no, we get it, and when you were talking about the Underdog stuff, I used to always call out the big brands for copying me, and then I was in the room with them, and I'm like, "Fuck, what do I say?" I had a huge war with Jeremy Scott, and then we were sitting next to each other, and I was like, "Oh, this is so awkward." But yeah, I think you just have to constantly be like, fashion is one of those things that never, like, you can't take a day off. You have to constantly be innovating and changing and transforming, and also trends change, so that gives you time to move and stuff like that. But yeah, copying's huge.
Yeah, I know. It's sad to see, like, the next day, literally the next day from a runway, if you go to Vogue runway, literally the next day you will see copies. It's so fast. It's so crazy how fast it can be. How about an open source? Like, where's the moat?
I think that at this point there are probably literally tens of thousands of Uniswap forks. Not even like, you only hear about a few of them, but there's there's been like many thousands, if not tens of thousands of times that the Uniswap code has been copied, both the protocol, but even like our interfaces have also been copied thousands of times. And for me, I think that it's actually really interesting. When we created this like swap interface, back then that interface didn't really exist, and it's kind of now the interface to most DeFi applications. I think for us, it's like we learn a lot from the people that copy us, because sometimes they copy, but then add a little bit of a twist, right? Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they copy and it's just boring. Me and Cal, who's our head of design, are always on the hunt for like Uniswap forks that have done something interesting.
That's so cool.
And occasionally it happens, and people like do like a slightly nuanced take, and we learn from it, and then we like integrate it back into our own product. So I think that that's useful. I think that like it's generally like it's forking and copying is a very good thing. I think that you can't, like, that's kind of the point, I think, is that like, people can build on top of what you've done. If someone can do it better, great. I think for me, the way that you fend off, like if someone is copying you, then they're like behind you, right? So you can't get complacent. Oh, people are copying me, so like I get to just chill, and I'm clearly the best. Everyone's copying me. You almost have to be like, oh, people are copying me. That means I have a chance to run ahead, right? And that's kind of what happened with like Uniswap v3. Is like everyone had forked Uniswap v2, and while they were all forking Uniswap v2 and trying to grow their Uniswap v2 forks, we shipped Uniswap v3.
That's amazing.
And then like Uniswap v3, we did have this like code license thing for a period of time, and we thought that like people would figure it out before then, but 2 years to the date after the day the BOSO license expired on Uniswap v3, all the people who copied us on v2 started copying v3.
And then you guys did
and now
v4.
we're working on Uniswap v4. So you can't get complacent just because people are copying you, but it's like but you should learn from it and use it as a time to.
I love that answer. So last question, both fashion and tech, there's cycles of innovation, there's cycles in fashion. One day you're in, one day you're out, like there's constantly cycles. How do you guys either plan for the future, stay optimistic? Any parting words?
I have a friend that was always saying, he's a musician, and he was like, I'm going to get 10 Grammys. And we're like, no, you're not.
Okay.
And he's like, but for me to get 10 Grammys from where I am right now is actually easier than where I started to where I am right now. And I think the optimistic thing is like, look how far we've gotten. And yeah, there'll be downs and ups and downs, but like, if we can get here from where we started, we can go to wherever we want to go.
That's so amazing.
Yeah. I think that's actually kind of a similar, like, people are often like, oh my God, like, I don't know, it's like crypto markets, like crypto has this thing where the markets are like this, and then like and then the tech is like this, and there's like a steady, constant drumbeat of progress and improvement. And we even saw that in like the state of crypto, right? And there's this like steady drumbeat of progress, and then people are like, oh my God, everything's amazing. Oh my God, everything's terrible. Oh my God, and it's just like you have this like crazy like volatility, and you just have to kind of like ignore that, I think. And for me, I'm like usually happier during the bear markets than the bull markets, personally.
Why?
Why? Because like, you get some peace and quiet, and you get to like focus on building. Because the actual thing that progresses the drumbeat of progress is really hard work and focus. And it's harder to do that when everyone is going crazy and everything's pumping. And so for me, like, it's partially about just like having long-term conviction in the value of what we're doing, and then just focusing on that, and kind of the noise sort of drowns out a little bit. And I have started to appreciate bull markets a bit, just because it's like, it does bring in funding, and it brings in various things. But for me, there's like so much to do that like, I'll if we have another 3-year bear market and that gives me 3 more years, then like, great. Like, we'll make a lot of tech progress in that point.
Both of you guys, it sounds like it's not just like cycles, but like steps upward. Both your answers, like that's the common theme, and I think that's a very great note to end on. Let's thank Colm and Hayden. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.